Hey everyone, welcome into another video. I hope you guys are doing amazing. Today I wanted to take a look at the latest release from Quixel, the Derelict Corridor Megascan sample. This is a project that they released a little over a month ago, and I've been wanting to look at this. I finally downloaded it today and opened it up and started looking at it a little bit. I thought it would be fun to just kind of make a video on some of the things that I am finding in it and talk a little bit about just the environment itself and the way that they are lighting some things and just see what we can learn from it. These projects are always amazing to be able to just, take a look at, learn, see how other people are lighting and how they're placing assets and creating these environments. And this is also just to kind of bring your attention to this if you don't already know, like these projects are completely free for you to download and use the assets or use the environment for your own projects. So they're really, really great resources. So let's go ahead and jump in. I've got the project downloaded here. I'll leave a link to this as well. And before we actually start looking at anything here, I want to just look at the project settings and just show you guys a couple of things that I noticed here. So if we go to the rendering tab here, pretty much everything is pretty kind of straightforward. They are using virtual textures. They're using Lumen, virtual shadow maps. Again, all this stuff. Well, I'm not sure if virtual textures is enabled by default now. Let's see. They are using TAA for anti-aliasing. I believe by default, TSR is enabled. So that's one of those things that you can just kind of experiment with, take a look at. Another thing that I noticed that was interesting is they are using megalights. So they have that enabled. That is something that is still pretty experimental. I think it just came out in 5.5. So keep that in mind. And they also have nanites enabled as well. So let's go ahead and jump into the project. And first of all, let's just kind of talk a little bit about the environment itself and just kind of the environment design. And I really just can't stress how good these environments are. I can't imagine how much work it took and how much time it took to create these environments and hand place all of these assets. And I really appreciate them taking the time to put these projects together for us to download and learn. And there's so much that we can use just for reference, if nothing else. It's just great to see what a kind of messy, derelict environment like this would look like and kind of use this for reference, if not, actually use some of these elements from the scene. But it's very helpful for myself and for others, so really do appreciate what they're doing. Let's see, if we just look around, this is basically just looks like, I don't know, an old warehouse or maybe an old hospital or something. It's a pretty good size environment, got a lot of different variety as well. I like how we've got these areas with the big bright windows here, and then we've got these much darker kind of corridors and kind of creepy areas in here. You can also see that it's pretty well optimized. My computer is not super high-end by any means. I've got a 3080 RTX 3080, 64 gigabytes of RAM, and a very old processor now. It was very good at the time that it came out. I've got an i9 9900K, but that is like 7 or 8 years old at this point, so it's still handling this environment pretty well. You can see that we are getting around 90 FPS, and it seems to be pretty consistent. One thing that we can look at, if we just disable megalights, we can see how big of an impact that has. And there's not really that many lights in this environment, so we're getting a little over 90 FPS there. I guess actually in this scene, not really much difference there. Yeah, okay, so that's quite a bit of difference there. We also, very different lighting. I'm not sure what exactly Megalights is doing to change that lighting so much. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I'd have to look more into that. Again, Megalights is very experimental, but it looks like they've set it up to work with Megalights. So if we were to relight this environment, which that could be interesting to do actually, if you guys want me to do that, let me know. I think that could be a fun little project for us, and just kind of a learning process as well. So anyway, I'm going to just leave that enabled since that was, I'm assuming their intended purpose is to have that enabled. And let's actually go ahead and start talking about the lighting. So overall, I think it's really good. I do think that there's maybe some things that could be improved, and we will talk a little bit about that. First of all, if we just kind of scroll way out here and take a look at this entire thing, so you can see that it is actually being lit from the outside here. So they have a skylight. So we can see if we turn that off, then this all goes black. And we can see that it is not a real-time capture. They are using a cube map here. And this is interesting to me because this is normally a setup that I would use if I was not using Lumen. I often use a skylight like this with a cube map, like a gray texture like this, and then add a little bit of intensity to just basically add a little bit of light into the shadows, to where everything is just not super contrasty. But what I find interesting is toggling this on and off doesn't really seem to change the look of the environment really, or the lighting really at all to me. So I noticed the other thing, they have a sky atmosphere in here as well, and I don't really know why they would have that either. So again, that's one of the questions that I would have, why they added these in. Maybe it was like they were initially doing a setup where this was making a bigger difference, and then they lit it a little bit different and just left it in there. If we go into like a darker area here, toggle that on and off, I really just don't see any difference to me anyway. I'm not seeing anything. We upped our intensity here. Okay, so we do start seeing a little bit there. Let's see. Let's go up to 1,000. Yeah, I mean, really, it's just kind of adding like a little bit of almost like specular highlights there, which I don't really like. Let's kind of look at the rest of the scene. Yeah, okay, so it is adding a little bit. Like if you look over here, we just go back to 1. That's obviously quite a bit darker. But again, if we just go to 100 where they have it set, I don't really notice any difference when we toggle that on and off. So that is interesting. Yeah, don't really see any difference here. So normally, I would, like I said, I would use a setup like this if I wasn't using Lumen. And we can kind of take a look here. So if we look at this scene here, and if we go to our post-process volume, we scroll down to global illumination. If we turn that off, then you'll see that this all gets really, really flat looking, right? And this is because now the skylight is really lighting all of this. So if we toggle the skylight off, then you can see that now this is like super contrasty. And I mean, it looks kind of cool, but this is obviously way too dark here because we're not getting any of that bounce lighting from global illumination. So what I would normally do if I was not going to use global illumination is I would go in here and I would, I don't know, let's actually just set this back to 1. So that's still way too low. If we go to like 10, okay, so you can see that's getting adding a little bit of light into the shadows here. Again, that's basically off there. And let's go to like 20. Okay, that's pretty close, I would say. And you can see that we do get quite a bit more FPS here, right? So we're almost at 120 now. And, okay, this is not looking great here. So this is where, you really do have to kind of tweak this a little bit more and figure out you might need like additional post-process volumes in here to adjust this. But and also, I want to say like there's no right or wrong way to do this. I just want to show you guys alternate ways that you can light a scene, and maybe some additional ways to light a scene if maybe you don't want to use Lumen, or maybe Lumen is you're finding Lumen to be really heavy in terms of performance. So this is a setup that you could use. But let's just go back to kind of the default that they have here. So let's go back and enable Lumen. All right. So, I mean, obviously, I would say this looks very good here. But, it is, really, this scene, we're not losing a ton of performance here. Maybe around 10 FPS, which can be significant, of course. And then, in some other areas, we go back to, let's see, where was that other hallway there? Yeah, so like this scene here, we're getting around 90. So if we disable global illumination, then again, this looks pretty bad here, but we are getting quite a bit higher FPS. And then if we wanted to maybe adjust the skylight, so bring this down to like 25 or so, that's not bad there. Okay, so, again, that's just another option that you could do. Let's reset it to what they had it with. Let's see. Back to Lumen. While we're in the post-process volume, let's just kind of take a look at what they're doing here. So first of all, they have a few different post-process volumes in here. So if I search for PPV, you can see that they have a global post-process volume, but then they also have these other ones for the specific areas. And this is something that I haven't mentioned before. I keep meaning to mention it, so I'm glad that they're showing it here. But you can absolutely have multiple post-process volumes in your level. So the normal way that you would do this is to have a global one like this, and then have these other ones. And if you scroll down to post-process volume settings, you can set the priority of these. So your global will be 0. And then you can see here, we have this one is a priority of 1. And then if we move into this area here, I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of a subtle change. Maybe if we go back through here. Yeah, I think you can see that there. It kind of changes the color grading of it here. So again, you can see it start to kind of change right there, right? It's kind of blending into this other post-process volume. And this is probably the yellow one. Yeah, so you can see it right there. If I toggle this on and off, we're just basically using this post-process volume. Now we're in this area, so we're using the blue one. But if we go back here, then we're using this one. And that is because they are setting the priority to 2 here. So this is the main priority. Then when we switch to this one is taking over. And then I think there's one here. Yep, that's a different one. And I think there's one more somewhere. But anyway, that is something that you can definitely do and can be very useful, especially if you're going from outside to inside. That can be really useful. Let's go back to the main post-process volume, talk a little bit more about what they're doing here. So we're using auto exposure. We've got a min EV and max EV of between 8 and 12. I don't think they're changing much else. It looks like on the local exposure, they're adding just a little tiny bit of detail strength, which I think is basically just adding a little bit extra light. It's very, very subtle. These are probably, very minor changes that they're doing, kind of like as far as like the last step, I would guess. Doesn't look like we're changing any color grading or anything like that. They're probably doing that in the individual ones. So if we go into this one, this is the blue one that we're in right now. And you can see here they are, it doesn't look like they're actually doing anything there as well. Oh, okay, yeah, they are changing the temperature a little bit. Well, no, actually, I take that back. That's the default 6500. They, probably we're just playing around with some of the values. Um, yeah, so this is pretty much the same as the global, it looks like to me. We go into the yellow one. Let's see. That one, same EV values. Okay, so they are changing the temperature a little bit here. Here you go. Now you can see that they are changing some values here. So again, this is just, just going in here and color grading this to fit this environment the way that they want versus this area. And that's cool that you can do that. So let's see, is there anything else that we want to talk about in the post-process volume? I've talked a little bit about physical-based values for lighting setups before. These are, I'd say pretty accurate for indoor lighting with kind of this bright light coming through. Now they're not using, they're not using a directional light or an HDR to light this or anything. These blocks here are basically emissive materials. So if we open these up, we can see that they have different intensities. And I will say you have to be a little careful lighting areas with emissive materials. Now you can see that they have an additional light here as well. If I can select that. Okay. So let's actually find that. Yeah, so let's take a look at what they're doing here. So yeah, so they are using the intensity units, they're changing to EV here. That can be helpful if you know that you're the range that you're in. So, we're in between 8 and 12, and so they're setting that to 9. If we look at lumens, this is going to be, like a really high number because essentially they're simulating like a sunlight, coming in, or not really a direct sunlight. This looks like it would maybe be like a very overcast day or something like that. But this is going to be a very high number here for these lights because these are kind of based off real world numbers here. All right. So another thing that I see, like right up here, it looks like they're actually just lighting this with, we don't actually have a light here, which is kind of odd to me. And that's why you're getting this kind of wavy artifacting looking light here. And you can even see that it kind of disappears. That's not from like an attenuation radius or anything. That's just the emissive light there that is not really able to light environments very well. So that's something that I don't really know why they wouldn't add an additional light here. It might just not have been super important, but to me, those really stick out. So what I would probably do here is if we just added like a rect light, and if we just scaled this up to kind of the size of this. So let's just change this somewhere around to there. All right, so something like this. And this is going to be very quick and rough. Let's just move this down. All right, so something like that. Now, obviously, you can't see the light doing anything here because this is way, way, way too dark. So if we use EV, which is what they're using, and let's try something like 9. Okay, so that's way too bright. Let's go to like 7, maybe 6. All right, so that's pretty good there. So now we're actually getting like an actual light coming from that. And then I think that we could probably lower the intensity of the emissive quite a bit here. So if we look at the emissive intensity, it's 2500. And really, since we're not lighting that now, we don't need it nearly that high. If we go to like 100 is way too low, maybe 500. Yeah, so 500 looks pretty good. you're still getting kind of the, those bulbs, or they're really just cylinders, it looks like. It looks like it's actually emitting some light. But now if we kind of go back here, you can see that that looks more like a real light, and we also don't have that kind of wavy artifacting that's going on there, right? And I just put a rect light in here. If you want it to be a little bit more optimized, you could do a spotlight. Spotlights are way more optimized, or not really optimized, but a rect light just is a lot more resource heavy. So we could do something like this, and then we could, let's see, set the source radius to maybe like, that's way too big, maybe 8. And then you can change the source length and basically get like a tube here, right? So we could do something like this. And then increase this out really high. And then again, we need to make this way brighter. So let's go to EV, try 6. So 7, 8, maybe something like that. We just toggle that on and off. I think I even kind of like that a little bit better than that rect light. Yeah, that's not bad. And again, now we're not getting that waviness there and that kind of artifact from the emissive. If I change that back to 2500, then you can see when I get close, you start to get that that artifacting again that to me looks pretty bad, and is not really adding a lot to the scene. Now, one thing that I do see that we could probably change is the color. So again, if we go back to 500 on that, I think that would be fine to still give us the intensity of that light, but then our actual light, we could change the, we could change the color, or we could change the actual temperature. I'll just change the color, just make this a little bit more blue. Okay, maybe something kind of around there. Yeah, so I think that's not bad. That would be a nice little change that I would probably do. Again, you can even still see a little bit of waviness or artifacting happening there. So that is coming from this emissive light here. So you got to be careful when you're trying to light things specific or solely with emissives, because you will get some artifacts like that. All right, so that is just something that I saw that we could do. This is another one here. You know, I don't really see much artifacting here, probably because, yeah, well, they actually have a light here. So that is the main reason why. Okay, so another thing that I want to look at briefly here are these two areas right here. So you can see that the lighting is quite a bit different here. We are basically just using these two different spotlights here, and we're kind of using it as a directional light, right? And if you look at these lights, you can see that these are really, really, really bright. So they're setting the intensity, the units in EV. If we change this to lumens, this is probably going to be crazy high. Yeah. So what is that, like 3,698,202 lumens? So very, very, very bright light. That, I mean, essentially this is a sun light, right? Or like a directional light. So that's why these values are so high, because the sun is actually really, really, really bright. So, you know, again, this is one of those things, why don't they just use an actual directional light? And I don't really know the answer for that. I would like to know what the advantages of doing something like this over using a directional light are. Might just be totally a preference thing. I do feel like, I don't know if it's being caused from that, but it does seem like we're getting a lot of, I don't know if you'd really call this artifacting, but all of this kind of misty shakiness that you can see in the fog here. I don't really know why that is happening. I'm guessing it's coming from these lights. Let's just kind of turn this on and off here and see. Yeah. So I wonder if it's actually from megalights. Let's actually toggle that on and off again and see. Oh yeah, so we're getting way different results here. I don't know why that is happening. Again, I have not used megalights nearly enough to know really what's going on with this. I do see that the indirect intensity has changed, so that, yeah, not a big difference there. I wonder if it's the fog. Let's see. So if we just turn that off, yeah, okay, so that's what it is. So I'm not sure exactly how we could fix that. We could probably clean that up a little bit. That's a little distracting to me. So I just spent a little time just kind of looking at some of the settings here. And there's a couple of things that I want to talk about. So first of all, with the fog, I don't really know how to clean this up. This, to me, looks pretty bad, and I wouldn't really want my scene to look like this. I would probably just end up disabling the fog, or at least lowering the intensity in these areas. If we just did this, so if we selected these lights, and let's see here, if we go to the volumetric scattering intensity, I think one is set to 3.5 and the other one is set to 3. So if we set those to 1, that's the default. You can see that that cleans it up a little bit, but you can still see it. So if we just set that to 0, then it gets rid of the those lights affecting the fog. We still have the atmospheric fog in our scene, but it's not being affected from those lights, and that cleans up those areas quite a bit. You know, it doesn't look as cool to have the kind of volumetric fog coming through the lights or through the windows like that, but I think it looks less distracting in my opinion. But that's just kind of a personal preference. If we set that back to 3.5, I think it is, you know, that is pretty distracting to me, especially when you're moving around. You can see it quite a bit, and even when you're sitting still as well. The other thing that I noticed, if I do change it to cinematic, then it gets quite a bit better, but is still there, honestly. Definitely not as noticeable, but it is still there. So, and you know, going to cinematic quality is really pushing the quality of everything very high. I usually try to kind of balance my scene for a high setting here. So yeah, that's just something that I thought I would bring up. Another thing that I want to talk about, and I know so many people ask about this, is just like Lumen artifacts, or they often don't even know that it's artifacts from Lumen. And so if you look up here, you can see it's really quite bad. Just like all this noise that we're getting in here. Also like in these areas right here, this is really, really noisy, right? If we zoom in, it's not quite as bad, but it's still quite noisy. And, you know, how do we fix that? Well, to be honest, there's not a great way to fix that from my experience. If anybody knows, please do let me know. Let us all know. I can show you some ways to fix that, and the kind of the most common way of fixing that is just basically brute forcing the Lumen settings, and I don't really think that that's a great fix because it's really pushing the limits of the hardware quite a bit. So if we go to PPV, find our post-process volume again, if we go down to Lumen, and you can see some of the settings here. So you can play around with some of these settings. The main thing that really affects a lot of things here is the final gather quality. So you can see by default that is set to 1. If we set that to something really high, like 16, you can see that pretty much gets rid of a lot of that. We do still have a little bit of artifacting and kind of some weird shadow artifacts there. I don't know if that is really even specifically because of Final Gather, but you can definitely see, like, as we go farther out, this area right in here looks really, really bad, right? So if we set this to, let's try 4. 4 is not bad. 8 cleans that up a lot. But the problem with this is this, it even says right here, greatly increases GPU cost, right? So you've got to be careful with that. Setting this too high is going to basically bring your performance down quite a bit. So keep that in mind. Really, I've played around with a lot of the other settings. They don't really do a lot that I can see in terms of actually fixing or improving areas like this. Now, one thing that does sometimes work is to actually take a look at the anti-aliasing. So if we go back here and we search for anti-aliasing, I know they were using TAA. Let's switch it to TSR. Okay, so that's actually quite a bit better, in my opinion. Let's look at it right here. So kind of in this area, if we go from TSR to TAA, yeah, that definitely is adding more noise that I'm seeing, especially up here. This is really noticeable. So if we go to TSR, that really smooths that out. Now, the problem with TSR, or not really a problem, but what you just need to understand is that this is basically an upscaling method, right? So some things can be smoothed out. I mean, this will happen with TAA as well, and you'll often see that there's a lot of people that really don't like TAA because it does kind of smooth some of the image out. And this is just kind of a trade-off that you have to kind of figure out figure out which way you want to go with. You know, I mean, if you turn anti-aliasing off, that looks very bad to me. And you obviously get aliasing in your scene. If you don't know what aliasing is, basically on sharp edges, it's usually really noticeable on like telephone wires and cords and things like that. You can kind of see it here, especially like right there. It's just like these jagged edges, right? So there's different forms of anti-aliasing that fix that. So we have something like FXAA. You can kind of toggle through these, check them out. TAA looks quite good, but TAA is really kind of blurring the scene. That's what a lot of these are doing, is just kind of blurring like edges and things like that to make them look smoother. TSR honestly looks really good. I think that that's a really good compromise. That's usually what I go with. Some people like other forms like MSAA, SMAA. There's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down. You can take a look at something like Digital Foundry if you want to really go down the rabbit hole and learn all about anti-aliasing. I would recommend it because, I mean, it is good to know as a developer. We're also getting a resizing virtual texture pools. I don't know exactly how that works. I don't use virtual textures much. All right, so I am kind of rambling at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video for now. But yeah, I hope you guys found this useful. There's honestly so much in this environment that we could talk about and go over. Maybe I'll do a part 2 if you guys like this. Be sure to let me know. And if there's any specific things that you'd like me to look at, or any ways that, you know, this is lit, or the actual environment. We didn't really even talk a lot about how the environment was laid out. So we could take a look at that more in depth if you guys would like that. Of course, this project is completely free, like I said, so you can download it yourself and check it out, and a lot to learn from it. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, just let me know. And if you found this useful, please be sure to leave me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And you can check out the links below if you want to support me in other ways. I do sell some assets on Fab, and I have a Patreon where I create assets, and you get these videos early and some other great perks there. So be sure to check those out. I really, really appreciate all of your support, and I will see you guys in the next video. All right, take care, guys.